The wrong Hardcastle. She had the right name. He had the wrong address. The wolf knew the difference. Welcome to a story by Susan Smith Nash. Chapter 1. The Cedar Static. The charcoal gray Ford Lightning hummed across the cattle guard, its tires crunching on the gravel of Oklahoma State Highway 15. Inside the cab, Charles Marlowe felt like his head was being squeezed in a vise. He'd been driving for 8 hours, but the pressure wasn't from the road, it was from the air. "It's the cedar," Marlowe muttered, rubbing the pressure points between his inner eyebrows and forehead. Yesterday, he'd been in his Houston office reviewing reservoir engineering reports on the latest Cherokee Shale wells. Today, he was in western Oklahoma, his friend and colleague Hastings accompanying him to check on operations with the Cherokee Shale and to see about acquiring additional leases. "What was that, Charlie?" Hastings asked from the passenger seat, not looking up from his tablet. "I'm looking at the lease maps. If the Hardcastles actually own the mineral rights over this entire lateral section, they're sitting on the most valuable brine and shale play in the mid-continent." "The smell," Marlowe gritted out. It's loud." To a human, it was just the scent of western Oklahoma. The sharp, resonant tang of invasive cedar trees and the ghostly charcoal remains of grass fires somewhere toward the Texas line. But to Marlowe's suppressed wolf, the scent was like jagged glass. He'd taken his Houston-prescribed alpha blockers that morning, but the Ellis County wind was stripping the chemical mask away. "We're lost, aren't we?" Hastings asked, finally looking out to the rolling hills of sage and scrub. "I plugged in the Airbnb address that Marla gave us. She set it up yesterday back at the office. I've sent her a Teams message for clarification, but the signal is terrible here. The GPS redirected us. Now it's taking us to an Airbnb attached to the local supply hub." Marlowe checked his phone. "Tony Lumpkin's Cattle and Comfort rental. It's right near the drill site. If the Airbnb Marlowe booked us is impossible to find, well, we can use this one. I just want a shower, a clean room, and enough distance from this nature to think clearly." The three pigeons. They found the so-called supply hub 10 minutes later. It was a low-slung building with a neon sign that flickered, "The Three Pigeons, Bar and Grill." A line of mud-splattered pickups sat out front like a row of tanks. As Marlowe stepped out of the truck, the smell hit him again. Cedar, diesel, and wet earth. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of unrefined shifters. At the center of the bar sat a man who looked like he'd been assembled from spare parts and denim. Tony Lumpkin was holding a long-neck Budweiser and explaining the intricacies of a deleted diesel engine to a group of nodding locals. Marlowe approached the bar, his Houston suit looking absurdly out of place. "I'm looking for the Cattle and Comfort Airbnb. I have a reservation." Tony turned, his eyes glinting with a mischievous, predatory light. He smelled Marlowe's instant hidden wolf and the stiff, repressed Houston energy, and he decided right then and there to have some fun. I'll be right back," Tony said. He stepped outside and pulled out his phone. He made a quick phone call, his features becoming animated with a rather suspicious enthusiasm. He rejoined the lost newcomers. "Oh, you're the engineer," Tony drawled, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Yeah, the Airbnb. Look, the GPS is wrong. It's about 2 miles up the road, a big white house with a Liberty Tree gate. The owner is an old guy named Jim, and, well, he's the help, really, but he thinks he's the alpha of the county. Just treat him like a concierge, and he'll get you whatever you need. Don't mind his temper. He just likes to pretend he's important. Concierge. Marlowe repeated, his eyes watering at the cedar smoke drifting from the bar's wood-burning stove. Fine. As long as it has a bed and high-speed internet. Oh, yeah. It's got everything you deserve. Tony chuckled, looking down at his phone and smiling. The arrival at Liberty Tree. As the Lightning pulled up to the Hardcastle ranch house, the sun was dipping below the horizon, turning the Oklahoma sky a bruised purple. Standing on the porch was Big Jim Hardcastle. He smelled of old leather and gun oil, an alpha scent so potent it made Marlowe's fingers twitch. Don't react. Don't react. Don't react. Marlowe told himself. He's just the Airbnb host. He's just the host. Keep it professional. Welcome. Kate said you got lost, Big Jim barked, crossing his arms. We're happy to help you out. It's easy to end up in a ravine if you're driving around in the dark. Marlowe stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks. He offered his hand, but looked confused. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, lost. The guy at the Three Pigeons said the rooms are ready. Is that right? Are we too late for dinner? Can we get any signal out here? Do you have a Wi-Fi password? Big Jim's jaw dropped. He looked at Marlowe, then at Hastings, then back to Marlowe. The scent of a storm front began to roll off the old rancher. Kate's work with Houston companies, now involved in the Cherokee shale play, was bringing her a lot of business. So he was predisposed to help. But this? My Wi-Fi? From behind the screen door, his daughter and the universally feared oil and gas attorney, Kate Hardcastle, watched the exchange. She usually wore professional attire, but today she was wearing a pair of oil-stained Wranglers and a thermal shirt, her hair tied back in a messy knot. The scent of honeysuckle and sand plum drifted off her, hitting Marlowe like a physical blow. He froze. His wolf, usually buried under the layers of Houston corporate armor, suddenly let out a low internal whine of recognition. She's the help, Marlowe thought desperately. She's the help, trying to ignore the way his heart hammered against his ribs. She's just a local ranch hand. Kate smirked, leaning against the doorframe. She'd seen his emails. Precise, cold, demanding. Seeing him now, vibrating with suppressed wolf energy and sneezing from the cedar pollen, well, she realized that the mix-up she'd orchestrated with Tony was going to be much more interesting than she'd planned. Welcome to the ranch, Mr. Marlowe, she said. Her voice like warm honey. I'll go see about that steak, but we're all out of medium rare. You'll take what we give you. She was going out of her way to avoid being introduced by name so that Marlowe and Hastings continued to think that this was a bed and breakfast called Liberty Tree, and that she was employed there as a cook, cleaner, supplies manager, and general all-around help. She wanted to meet Marlowe, especially, and have a conversation with him as a person, not as two super formal and ultimately stiff professionals. There was something in their interaction that intrigued her if they could just break the ice. Chapter 2, The Equipment Shed. The interior of the Liberty Tree ranch house was a sensory nightmare for Marlowe. It wasn't the dirt. The place was spotless. It was the history. Every rug, every piece of heavy oak furniture, and every trophy on the wall hummed with the scent of century-long lineage. To Marlowe's city-fied wolf, it felt like walking into a territory that had been claimed 1,000 times over. This Airbnb is remarkably domestic, Marlowe remarked to Hastings as they stood in the foyer. He looked at Big Jim, who was currently vibrating with suppressed alpha rage. Is there someone who shows around, gets us settled in, or do we just stand there? Or they just stand there looking ominous? Big Jim caught Marlowe's words, which he hadn't expected anybody to hear, and looked pointedly at him and growled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Marlowe's chest. Well, maybe you'd like to be driving around lost, son. We might be the only thing between you and a plunge off a dark road into a canyon. Oh, do you have drilling equipment out here too? Asked Marlowe. You've got quite a place. I'm really impressed. Big Jim's face relaxed, and he assumed an expression of pride. There were two things he loved to brag about, besides Kate. One was cattle. The other was his well-stocked equipment yard, the types of equipment in high demand in the booming Cherokee shale play. You're an engineer. You'll like what you see. Go ahead, gestured Big Jim. The scent of sand plum. 20 minutes later, Marlowe crossed over the equipment yard and was in the equipment shed, a cavernous corrugated metal building that smelled of grease, diesel, and, thankfully, less cedar. He was hunched over a workbench, staring at a high-performance diamond-tipped lateral bit, trying to focus on torque specifications. His Houston training told him to analyze the data. His wolf told him he was being watched. The air shifted. The sharp, metallic tang of the shed was suddenly pierced by something sweet. Sand plum blossoms, tart and wild, followed by the heavy floral allure of honeysuckle. Marlowe didn't turn around. His heart began a frantic, rhythmic thumping against his ribs. His repressed alpha nature was waking up. His wolf leapt to his feet. The static of the Oklahoma wind was being replaced by a singular, focused frequency. Purr. You're holding that wrench wrong, a voice said. Marlowe turned. It was the girl from the porch. She had a streak of dark grease across her cheekbone and was carrying a thermos. In the dim amber light of the shed, she didn't look like the help. She looked like a predator in a flannel shirt. I am the lead engineer for the Cherokee Shale project, Marlowe said, his voice hitching slightly. He tried to summon his Houston arrogance, but it came out a little strained. I don't hold things wrong. Well, you do when the threading is left-handed, Houston, Kate said, stepping into his personal space. She set down the thermos and reached past him to take the wrench. As her arm brushed his, a spark of pure shifter electricity jolted through him. Marlowe gasped. Stumbling back a step, his wolf, usually silent, a silent prisoner in his mind, let out a sharp, inquisitive yelp. You're very knowledgeable. Airbnb and equipment too? Marlowe stammered. He realized with horror that his Houston stutter, the one he'd spent thousands of dollars in therapy to erase, was back. You too, for a guy who spends his time in a Houston boardroom, Kate countered, her eyes flashing a bright, tawny gold for a fraction of a second. She leaned against the workbench and flashed a quick smile. It's one of the advantages of being out in the middle of the field and operations. You get a chance to try a lot of things, broaden your range. Kate leaned over and picked up a small bit. You might want to take a look at this. It's new. Check out the pattern. As Kate showed Marlowe some of the innovations being developed to tackle the specific problems in the Cherokee Shale, Marlowe relaxed, the nerves and the stutter falling by the wayside. No one who knew Kate only by reputation would have dreamed that this was the same attorney, famed and even feared for the lengths she would go to in defending local landowners' rights, whether on the surface or in the mineral estate or with respect to water. The release. Kate and Marlowe made their way back from the equipment yard and the outbuildings to the ranch house. He started sneezing again. Ugh, the cedar, he admitted, his shoulders dropping. Sorry, it's like someone is shouting in my ear and, well, Big Jim, his aura hits like a thunderstorm. Kate hid a smile. He's sensing Dad, she realized, and he's fighting it. Maybe you need to just stop struggling, resisting, she said softly as they got back to the house. I'll show you some core samples. She picked up a piece of Cherokee shale, dark, dense. She handed him the sample. As their fingers met, it happened again. And this time Marlowe didn't pull away. The scent of honeysuckle was overwhelming now, drowning out the cedar, drowning out the smoke, and for the first time, the static in his head went silent. Well, time to start thinking about dinner, she said, her voice a low, earthy purr. I'm going to check email. I'll be back, he whispered. Well, she said, turning toward the door, don't work too hard. The grass is dry, the wind is picking up, and my brother Tony is out there somewhere helping with the cattle. That is usually a recipe for disaster. She disappeared into the twilight, leaving Marlowe standing in the grease-smelling shed, clutching a piece of shale like it was a holy relic. His wolf was not pacing anymore. It was waiting. The brewing storm. Outside, the wind shifted to the north. A mile away, near a decommissioned pump jack, Tony Lumpkin was trying to light a cigarette with a malfunctioning, windproof lighter. Stupid city tech, Tony muttered, flicking the lighter again. A spark flew. It didn't hit the cigarette. It landed in a thick, silver-gray patch of bone-dry cheatgrass, right at the base of a towering, oily red cedar. The mistake of the night was about to get very, very hot. Chapter 3. The Effrontery. The dining room of the Liberty Tree was lit by a wrought-out iron chandelier that threw long, flickering shadows across the walls. Big Jim sat at the head of the table, his large hands resting flat on the lace tablecloth, his late wife's favorite. He was a wolf who had fought off coyotes, droughts, and hostile takeovers, but nothing had prepared him for the internal battle of not ripping Charles Marlowe's throat out. This wine, Marlowe said, swirling a glass of Big Jim's Private Reserve Malbec. It's a bit aggressive. Tell me, do you usually stock local labels, or is this just what was left in the cellar? Big Jim's knuckles turned white. He thought of the email Kate had shown him, the one where Marlowe praised her legal mind. Okay, do it for her, Jim reminded himself. Do it for the girl. This boy's brilliant, even if he has the manners of a stray cur. Well, it's from Vineyard down in the Altus area, Big Jim said, his voice a low, controlled rumble. I find it has character, something that survives the wind. Character, scoffed Marlowe, oblivious to the fact that he was insulting his host's heritage. I suppose that's one word for it. Now, about the linens, I notice that they are not hypoallergenic. In the future, you might want to update your inventory if you want to keep your rating up. Big Jim blinked. Rating? He assumed Marlowe was talking about some high society social registry in Houston. I'll be sure to tell the inventory manager, Jim gritted out. Silent observer. Kate entered the room carrying a tray of steaks. She saw the scene. Marlowe, arrogant and relaxed because he thought he was talking to a servant, and her father, who looked like he was about to undergo a spontaneous transformation just to end the conversation. She set the plate down in front of Marlowe. Here's your steak, Mr. Marlowe, seared on the cast iron, just the way you ordered. Marlowe looked up, and for a second his City Alpha mask slipped. The scent of honeysuckle and sand plum was even stronger now, mixed with the savory smell of the meat. His wolf gave a sharp tug on his leash. Thank you, Kate, Marlowe said, his voice losing its edge for a brief moment. You have a very efficient way of moving. Big Jim cleared his voice loudly. She's my daughter, son. Efficiency is in the blood. Now, let's talk about the Cherokee Shale. You've been looking at the seismic data. My daughter says you have a plan for the lateral drilling that avoids the fault lines near the creek. Marlowe snapped back into his professional mode, but his arrogance remained. I do, but I don't usually discuss multi-million-dollar logistics with the house staff. No offense, Jim, but I'd prefer to wait for the attorney to arrive. Is she coming tonight, or is she delayed, like the high-speed internet? Big Jim stood up so fast, his chair scraped against the hardwood like a gunshot. He looked at Kate, then at Marlowe. The air in the room grew heavy with the scent of storm front and gun oil. I think, Big Jim said, his eyes glowing a faint, dangerous amber, that I have had just about all the feedback I can take for one night. Kate, show this gentleman where the extra blankets are. I need to go check the perimeter. The wind is picking up, and I smell smoke. The turning point. Marlowe watched him go, feeling a strange prickle of respect he couldn't quite name. He's very intense for a hospitality manager. Jim stood over him, her arms crossed. She knew she should tell him now. She knew she should reveal that the man he had just insulted was the very man who held the keys to his career. But then she looked at Marlowe's face, the way his eyes searched hers, the way he seemed to breathe easier when she was near. He's an alpha, Charles, Kate said softly. In this county, that means more than a job title. You should be careful if you treat as the help. Some people around here have very long memories. Before Marlowe could respond, The lights flickered and died. Outside, a low orange glow began to silhouette the jagged tops of the red cedar trees on the northern ridge. The smoke wasn't a metaphor anymore. "Tony!" Kate whispered, her face pale. "The idiot actually did it." Chapter 4. The Fire in the Shale. The power outage plunged the Liberty Tree into a thick, suffocating darkness, broken only by the rhythmic, hellish pulsing of orange light from the north. The wind had shifted into a true red dirt gale, carrying the eye-watering scent of incinerated red cedar and the sharp, chemical tang of parched cheatgrass. "Hastings, get the emergency kit!" Marlowe shouted, his voice finally losing its corporate polish. The city wolf inside him was clawing at his throat. The smell of smoke was a primal trigger, shredding the last of his Houston-prescribed composure. "Charles, look!" Kate pointed toward the ridge. The fire was crowning, leaping from the oily tops of one cedar tree to the next like a line of exploding torches. And right in the middle of the heat, silhouetted by the flames, was a line of panicked cattle, their eyes reflecting the fire as they milled aimlessly against a cedar-clogged fence line. "The north pasture!" Kate gasped. "If they don't get to the water, the heat will kill them before the flames even reach the fence. But the gate is blocked by the old cedar thicket. The help takes charge." At that moment, Big Jim burst through the mudroom door, his face streaked with soot. He looked at Marlowe, and with a mixture of desperation and ancient alpha authority, "The truck is blocked," Jim roared over the wind. "Tony tried to drive the dually through the creek bed to cut them off, but he high-centered it in the mud. He's stuck. The cattle are trapped. And the wind is pushing the fire right into the basin." Marlowe didn't hesitate. He didn't ask about his rating or his stake. He looked at the orange horizon, and for the first time in his life, he didn't try to suppress the low, guttural growl that started in his chest. "They won't move for a human," Marlowe said, his voice dropping an octave. "And they won't move for a truck. They need to be driven." "Charles?" Kate whispered, watching him. Marlowe ripped off his tie, discarded his suit jacket onto the muddy porch floor. "Jim, get the pond. Clear the brush on the south side till they have a landing. Kate, I can't do this alone. I've spent my whole life hiding what I am, but I can't calculate my way out of this." He looked at Kate, his eyes fully gold now, glowing brighter than the fire. "I need the girl from the shed. I need the wolf who knows this land." The dual shift. Kate didn't waste time with words. She kicked off her boots, her flannel shirt hitting the porch a second after Marlowe's. In a blur of muscle and fur, the engineer and the attorney vanished. Where the arrogant Houston man had stood, there was now a sleek, charcoal-gray wolf, built for speed and endurance, his fur smelling of industrial ozone and raw power. Beside him, a tawny golden wolf shook herself out, Kate. She smelled of sandplum and honeysuckle, even in the heart of the smoke. "Go!" Kate's thought flickered into Marlowe's mind, a silver thread of a pack link he'd never experienced before. They ran. Chapter 5. The Pond and the Resolution. The heat was a physical wall. As they reached the north pasture, the sight was chaotic. Tony Lumpkin, in his scruffy mottled gray wolf form, was yapping uselessly at a lead heifer, only succeeding in driving the herd deeper into the oily cedar thicket. His massive truck sat tilted in the mud, its headlights flickering weakly, a literal wall of steel blocking the cattle's only path to the shallow farm pond. "He's in the way," Marlowe's wolf mind snarled. He didn't stop. Marlowe used his momentum, his charcoal gray frame hitting the side of the cattle with a disciplined, herding pressure. He didn't bite. He steered, using his superior Houston-bred speed to cut off the strays. Kate was the precision. She dived into the thicket, weaving through the static of the cedar branches, her golden for a flash of light that guided the terrified animals toward the gap Marlowe was creating. The truck! The truck! Kate signaled. Tony, seeing them, tried to, quote, help by snapping at the lead bull, but he only caused a bottleneck. Marlowe let out a roar. A true alpha vocalization that silenced Tony's yapping. Marlowe dove under the rear bumper of the truck, his powerful shoulders wedging into the mud. With a heave of pure instinctual strength, he nudged the frame just enough for the lead heifer to see the opening to the water. Now! The herd surged. 100 head of cattle poured past the stuck truck, through the mud, and into the center of the shallow farm pond. They stood, belly deep in the water, huddling together as the fire roared over the ridge and died out against the moisture of the pond's edge. The morning after, as the sun rose over a charred but safe Ellis County, the smoke began to thin. Marlowe stood on the bank of the pond, dripping with mud and soot, slowly shifting back into his human form. He was exhausted, shivering, and covered in the smell of the Oklahoma earth. Big Jim walked down the bank, carrying 2 heavy wool blankets. He stopped in front of Marlowe. The old alpha didn't say a word about concierges or Wi-Fi. He reached out and placed a heavy, calloused hand on Marlowe's shoulder. You've got a good engine in you, son, Jim said, his voice thick with respect. And you've got a better heart than I gave you credit for. Kate emerged from the water, wrapping herself in the second blanket. Her hair was a disaster. Her face was smudged with ash, and she smelled like a swamp. Marlowe looked at her, really looked at her. The attorney, he breathed. You're Kate Hardcastle, the one who's been out-arguing me in every email for 6 months. Kate smiled, the sand plum scent finally returning as the smoke cleared. And you're the arrogant engineer who thought he was staying at the Cattle and Comfort Airbnb. Marlowe winced, glancing back at the house. I suppose I owe your father a very large apology, and perhaps the new vineyard. Forget the wine, Big Jim chuckled, looking at the two of them. I think the Cherokee Shale is in good hands, providing you two can stop stooping long enough to sign the contracts. Marlowe reached out, taking Kate's hand. The static in his head was gone. The cedar didn't smell like a threat anymore. It smelled like home. I think, Marlowe said, pulling her close, that the mistake of the night was the best decision I never made. Tony Lumpkin's voice drifted over from the stuck truck where he was still trying to find his shoes in the mud. Hey, is anyone going to help me move this forward, or am I just the help now? Kate and Marlowe shared a look, then turned toward the ranch house, leaving Tony to his mud. The Cherokee Shale was waiting. Thank you very much for listening to this story, and I hope you take a moment to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Where are you listening from? It'd be great to know. And again, this is the wrong Hardcastle. She had the right name, he had the wrong address, and the wolf knew the difference. Thank you, and can't wait for the next one.